Hey everyone, Jay here. Time for another Python lab. This time again with arrays. And this time what we're going to do with an array or a list is we're going to send that list to a function, modify it, and send it back, which is kind of impossible, but you'll see how we do it. So as always, I have my starting shebang and comment at the top. I have my main function, my if name equals main at the end. Okay. And what's in my main? Let's have a look. I have a list called my list, and it's just the numbers, uh, doubling 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc. Then I'm going to print my list, call my special function I made called list doubler. I'm sure you know what that does. Send my list to it. Now see, this is what I'm doing. I'm sending my list to the list doubler, and then I'm saying my list is equal to whatever gets returned. It's a short list, so it's not a big deal, but if I had to do this with like a 10,000 item list, that would be a big deal because it would make a copy of the list, send it to the function, and then return another copy of the list and assign it to the original list. All right. So this is not the most efficient way to do it, but it is a way to modify lists from a function and in a loop. All right. And so we're just learning the first step of the process. Okay. If you're looking for efficiency, this part is not very efficient. Later, inside the function, that part's fine. All right. So once I've updated my list, I'm going to print it again, do a good my message, and that's it. Right. But I'm going to print it with my own special print function this time. Right. Last time we just used the print. This time I'm doing my own special print function, which does the following: takes my list as an input, uses a for loop to loop through the whole list, prints each item on its own line, one at a time, then prints a blank line at the end of that. Okay, so still pretty basic, but you can see that now we're like, oh, now we can do different stuff with our lists, right? We can kind of do whatever we want. Yes, you can. Moving on, I have my list doubler function, and I have three different methods of looping through the list and then accessing what's inside of that list. Okay, this is the meat of this lab right here. Finally, we've reached it. Okay, so my list doubler function, I've sent my input. Oh, I've sent my list to it. I've called it my input. Sorry, forgot the name of the variable there for a moment. And let's talk about each method one at a time. Let me comment out each one. We'll do one at a time. We'll see what, anything, the difference is. Method one, I created iterator variable, set it to 0, and then I loop while I is less than, and then I get the length of my list right here. So len function, my input, my list, will give me the length, the number of items that are in there. And then I can loop through. I start at 0 and I go through the number of items that are in there. Now this is going to work assuming you have a list and you don't have a set which is not indexed by number, so this numerical list won't work. We're using a list, of course. So I index it by saying my input, use the square brackets, and I put a number in there. Now the first time this loop runs, that will be 0, and we'll get the first index. And we'll say the value at the first index is equal to the value at the first index times 2. Right? Then I increment my loop iterator variable, and then I just keep going until I reach the end, reach the last one. So I've multiplied each one by 2. Now remember, we're passing into this function, okay, something we've only barely talked about a little bit in functions is when we send a value to the function, we're sending a copy of that value. We're not sending a reference to the original variable, okay? That original variable is called myList, and it exists in the main function, but it doesn't leave the main function. When I call another function and I access that variable, I'm not accessing it. I'm accessing a copy of it, or just a value that is a copy of it. Okay. So this is pass by value in that function. There is such a thing as pass by reference. And in pass by reference, if I were to send a reference to an array, then I would really directly access that original array, and I could modify it, and I wouldn't have to return the value. Pretty much all advanced languages have a way to do this. We're just not doing it here yet because one step at a time. Okay, so after I've done this, I need to return that list again. Okay, so I send the list and I return the list. Okay, we're not making a reference to it yet, but now that you know what it is, we may in the future. Okay, so this is the first method that I have for you in order to go through all the items in a list and then perform some action on it. The action this time is just a multiplying by 2, right? Very easy. The action is not the hard part. It's how do we loop through a list and then access each element in the list. So one way is by the index variable or the index value of the list. Okay, that's a pretty good way. Let's see what else we got. Next way is a for loop. Okay, now we need to do one extra step, but we won't have to do the iteration ourselves. The for loop takes care of that. So that's pretty good. For I in range, and that range I'm passing the length of my list. Okay, so remember range from for, we've used it in for loops before. Okay, you can use it outside of for loops as well, but we often will use it in a for loop. And so this will start at 0 and it will go up to 1 less than the length, 1 less than the value I put in here. So when I put the length in, there is how many items? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 items. Okay, so this is going to have for I in range 10, and it's going to start at 0 and go to 9 because it's a computer program and it knows the right way to go through and loop through arrays. Okay, so now that I've set my for loop up this way, I don't have to do that I plus equals 1. It's taken care of for me, and I can just access my array and perform whatever action I want. I'm going to multiply by 2 again. Right, so that's method 2. Method 2 is slightly more advanced than method 1, but they're pretty much the same still. Now, method 3, I got my comment a little bit different this time here. There we go. Method 3, which is a bit Pythonic, okay, it's using some stuff that's fairly unique to Python. It's another for loop, but this time I have 2 variables in the front, and then my loop will loop through, and I'm calling this new function we have here called enumerate. And enumerate returns 2 things. It returns an iterator, like I, and it also returns the value of the array at that index, right? So actually, I should probably call this index and value, right? Index. So enumerate is going to return 2 things. First the index, then the value And now I can officially say that my input at index is equal to value times 2, right? Which is a little bit quicker to write, I guess, right? I don't have to write this my input index twice. All right, so those are three very similar but quite different ways to loop through every value in an array and then modify it in whatever way you're going to do, right? Access it and do something with it. Okay, in our case, we're just multiplying it by 2 to show that we can indeed access that variable, or that value within that array, right? So let's run this, and yeah, let's run this. Let's run, I guess we'll run in order. Actually, I haven't tried running all three of these. It's going to multiply by 2, multiply by 2, and multiply by 2. I haven't tried running all three of them at the same time yet. Let's get crazy. All right. No trouble there. So the first print, 1, 2, 4, yada, yada, and then multiply by 2, and multiply by 2. Okay, so 1 times 2 is 2, times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So yes, indeed, all these things did multiply by 3 times. All right. Now, we don't have to run all three of these. If you're doing this for my class, I would say pick your favorite and just do one of them. But I do encourage you to try all three of them. Get in the habit of writing multiple things, right? In the habit of writing all of them at least once. And then your output will, if you're doing one, your output will just be multiplied by 2 once instead of 3 times. All right, that's it. We looped through an array and accessed all the values contained within, and we did some math on them. Awesome. All right, there's the code for this function. Pause and copy that. And here is the code for my main and my print function. All right, that's it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.